conversation, but I've had some designers tell me, oh, well, I had this long career as a graphic designer and now I'm starting over as a UX designer. And I want to tell you right now, no, you're not starting over. And I don't care if you were a police officer, a lawyer, anything in that career and you've decided to make the switch to UX, you're not starting over. Okay, so that's head trash that I want you to banish from your brain tonight and work on that. Okay, your past skills are all valuable and none of them should be considered worthless as you move into UX. UX designers come from a wide range of fields, and it's that diversity in skills that's the reason why UX is so in demand right now, is because the designers who are doing UX are coming from all different backgrounds. Okay, and there's a lot from those previous backgrounds that can be beneficial in the UX field. So I want you guys to get in that mindset and shift that right now. That's my first tip. My second tip is imposter syndrome. If you guys can give me a reaction, if you want, raise your hand, say, yes, I have imposter syndrome. How many people have imposter syndrome? Raise your hand for me. Give me a clap, a wave. Something like that. Only like three people. Thank you. Okay, it's good. Thank you for admitting. I have imposter syndrome too, guys. I totally do. I get it all the time. And it's helping. The more I do this and the more I talk with people, the more I realize, okay, I do have some skills. I do have that. And I want you to know it is so natural to have imposter syndrome. And even people that have been in their career for years, if you have been to any of our previous meetups and we've talked with senior UX designers, they have it too. Like that's just part of being human. So I want you to think about it and admit, one, that you have imposter syndrome when those feelings come up of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm never going to make it. That's all imposter syndrome talking. Okay, so what I want you to do is drown out the imposter syndrome with a new message. And the new message is me telling you, you can do this. You're totally capable. You have the skills that you need. Are you a senior designer? Maybe not, but you don't have to be. And in fact, this place, if you're particularly early in your career, this place where you are is actually a really great place to be. That beginner's mindset is something that is going to help you as a designer move throughout your career. Okay, there's kind of three phases that I see in a career, and I typically see this with developers, but I'm starting to see it with designers too. You have what I call the junior designer, the beginner mindset. These are designers that they're anxious to know more. They're learning, they're soaking it all in. Teach me more, and trying and experimenting and failing. And failure doesn't feel good, and it's a little bit scary, but they're trying it. Okay. Now, once they get to a certain phase, it's awesome. It's like an uptick in skill level right there, and then they get to mid-level. Mid-level is the scariest part of your career. This is where you can really hurt yourself as a designer. This mid-level is where you think you know a lot. And honestly, you think you know more than you actually do. And this is the scariest place to be. And what I want you to promise yourself and take an oath and say, when I get to that area and I say, I already know how to do this. I don't need new skills. I don't need to learn that. I already got everything I need. That's when you need to check yourself and say, oh, wait, Cindy said not to do that. That's about 3 to 5 years in your career. And that's where it's the most dangerous, because that's when you can start being shoved aside and not be relevant anymore. Then the senior designers, those are the ones that have learned, wow, I still don't know a lot. And they're better designers for it. They have all that experience plus that beginner's mindset still. That's the sweet spot. That's where you want to go to. Now, how are we going to get there, right? You have all these past skills and you have these things that it's kind of unclear how it relates to UX, okay? So what I want you to do is look at them and take an assessment of all the skills that you have from your previous career. And I want you to promise yourself that you're not going to hide the fact that you worked in a different industry, okay? Because that different industry experience is actually very beneficial. And I'll give you some examples. I've had a couple of conversations recently with people who had been coding, maybe taking computer science in college, or had done a couple of years as a front-end developer and decided that that wasn't really a good path for them. And so they wanted to transition into UX design, which is pretty different, even though they're related. And telling me that they were like, well, I'm gonna have to start over. Honestly, there is a lot to know as a UX designer, and you want to have that portfolio, but all that other experience is totally valid, and it's a differentiator. It's what sets you apart. So in the case of software developers or people who are doing programming, those coding skills with a UX designer is a very unique thing that you want to play up. That is your superpower. Okay. So let me look at the chat. You guys want to put in the chat, or you can come off mic, of what skills do you have that, you know, from a previous career that don't seem like they have anything to do with UX? Think about that for a second. What skills do you have that don't seem like they have anything to do with UX? Illustration, marketing, okay, customer service. Okay, anybody else? Purchasing and procurement, handling middle schoolers, neuroscience researcher, coordination with general contractors, licensed massage therapist, fashion design. Wow. All right, first of all, super impressed with all of your experience and totally disagree that they have nothing to do with UX. Let's take one for an example. So running a kitchen. Okay, running a kitchen. And let's see, Cecile, I don't know if you have a mic or anything like that, but feel free to come off mute if you'd like. I'm making assumptions about running a kitchen. And my thought is that there's a lot of organizational skills that go into it. There's project management that goes into it. There might even be, if you're designing meals, you're designing what the experience is for the person who's the end user of those meals. There's wordsmithing there. And maybe some of them are more soft skills, but some of them are definitely hard skills. It takes a lot of hard work in order to run a kitchen and manage a lot of sous chefs and make sure that everything's running smoothly. UX designer working on a team has to do very similar things, and maybe more in a managerial role, but you have to work with a team and make sure the project is moving forward. So there's definitely some overlap there. Let's see, empathy from real estate clients. Yeah, I see the empathy for sure. Customer service, there's UX totally in customer service. Understanding what is the experience for the person that you're talking to on the phone, if they're calling in to complain, those kinds of things really help with UX. I can name it. Amanda, jump in where you see stuff. Media production. I came from a journalism background in broadcast. So just understanding how to tell a story, that is part of the UX experience that totally overlaps. Let me see, fashion design, being a designer and thinking about how to craft the visual look and feel, that's part of UX too. So there's a lot. You guys have all named things. I'm looking at the list in chat, even from the medical field. I would say, I might take me a little bit longer, Kayla, to come up with some skills from the medical field, but I know that people, it depends on what your role was in medical. But if you're, you know, managing an office, there might be soft skills that have to do with, you know, working with your coworkers. Maybe you were interacting with patients. There's a lot of empathy that goes into talking with patients and understanding their stories so that you can communicate that to somebody else on the team. So there's a lot that goes on there. Thank you all for sharing. I really appreciate it. Amanda, anything else on the experience front that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's just really important to realize that I think actually every field that you have any type of experience in is in some way, shape, or form relatable to some of the skills that are required in UX: empathy, management, communication, teamwork. Those are all soft skills that you learn with any type of experience, and they're all relatable to UX. So as long as you do the work to have your hard skills, you can use Figma, you know what a wireframe is, you can, you feel comfortable running an interview session. That is, that's what makes you the UX designer, and all of those soft skills just add to this beautiful, like portrait of who you are as a person, and it's all relevant.
Yeah, so I see just like Amanda said, I see all of those skills that you already have. You're just adding UX skills on top of it, right? It's like a Lego house. And so if you started off with nothing, then you kind of have to start from scratch. But you all have already started off with like all these skills that you've developed over your years in whatever the field is, soft or hard skills, and they can transfer into UX in different ways if you're creative enough to think about like how they are. Now, and I think that's where our worksheet is going to come in, is to get you to think through those things. What are the actual skills that are within each of the career fields that you are in, so that you can pull them out, because a lot of things overlap very nicely. I also wanted to say that, in terms of a portfolio, particularly if you're already in a creative field, I don't think it's necessary for you to hide that you did graphic design, that you did, software development, and still have that maybe in a separate tab on your portfolio. I think it's important to show that you have a long career, and the same goes for your resume. I don't think you should hide the fact that you had a totally different career on your resume, especially if it's a long one. Even if it's a short one, you should definitely show that. I still have all of the TV stations that I worked at on my resume, because I want to show people that that's what I did before, and I didn't start my career in 2007. I had a long career before that. So it's still important to me even after all these years. And I also wanted to say, I lost my place in my notes, mostly about playing to your advantage. So now I want you to think about any soft skills that you have, that or anything that you actually, let me go back. I want you to think about the UX profession, which is so broad. What are the things in UX that seem uncomfortable for you, that you feel like you need more more training in, that the skills that you had from previous aren't gonna mesh with? You want to share that in the chat? User surveys, front end. Yeah, totally get that. Anybody else? Running a focus group, yeah. Interaction design, A/B testing, conducting user testing, all the design stuff. Yeah. Handoffs to the developers. We're going to take notes on all of these things so we can do future UX and ATX topics for all of these things too. I think and I'm actually glad to see all of this, particularly what I particularly hear is that the skills on the side of like actually building out the designs, the interaction, the wireframing, the visual things, that's where a lot of people who are particularly coming from a different field, not graphic design, not something in a creative field, maybe more medical or something like that, that's where they feel the most uncomfortable, because that's where they have the least amount of experience. So if you think back on all of your skills, because you don't have those things that feel the most uncomfortable for you, that's why you need to focus so hard on those skills that you've gained in a previous career that can enhance the work that's done in those particular areas. So I would say for those of you that are uncomfortable on the research side. So the surveys and the conducting focus groups and those kinds of things that might come out in an interview. But if you can show customer service experience, if you can show that the work you did maybe had a lot of empathy in it, listening, taking notes, all those if you break things down into their very, very base building blocks of skills, that's what's going to be very helpful in showing that, hey, maybe you don't have experience in this area, but all these skills help you get there. Okay, so that's one way to do it, is break things down into their very basics. So if research is all about taking notes, reaching out to people, talking to people on the phone, listening, analyzing spreadsheets, things like that, and you have pieces of that over here, you can pull them together. And I'm sorry, but my husband's alarm is going off, so I can hear it in the background. It's driving me crazy. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's driving me absolutely insane. The other thing I wanted to say about those areas that make you feel a little uncomfortable is to really think about, like, you know, where can I show that even though I don't have this experience over here, that I was able to learn something. Okay, so this is where I always like leaned on. Like maybe I didn't have all the skills for design, but I could show that when I got a project, I saw it through to the end. Or when I got a project, I finished it on time. Or I learned new skills on the job. That kind of stuff that you can show from your previous careers, that's going to be really helpful in showing a hiring manager that maybe you don't have the skills right now, but you are capable of learning and you want to learn, and you've got the drive in order to do it. So those past skills, being able to show like grit and tenacity and dogged curiosity and all those things, are going to help you to make you look good, make all of those skills look good as you're going into this career. Let me see, what else did I miss on that one, Amanda? Any other examples?
I think you covered the examples really well. I do know we wanted to touch on descriptive ways to build out their resume to make it impactful.
Yeah, do you want to share your screen? Do you have any resumes up? I can share mine, and I can talk through the impact part.
I don't have a resume up if you'd like to share.
Sorry, I'll talk through it then. I'll find my resume. But I wanted to talk to you guys about, on your resume, when you are putting your previous jobs and skills, what I want you to do is think about, instead of just what the job was, the impact that you made. Okay, so say you were doing customer service, answering the phone. Is there a way that you can wordsmith that to show that the impact you made for the client or the customer or the company? That impact is really what stands out. So if you can say, like, I, improved the lives of, 40 customers in a week. Every time I answered the phone, I helped them with a problem. That kind of thing, showing impact, really helps, you know, make you a stronger candidate, because you're able to take those past things and turn it into something where, oh wow, there's a change made to the bottom line, or customers kept coming back, or maybe you did like a whole website for them. Those are the kinds of things that'll be helpful. Another example might be, particularly for those of you that are coming from the medical field, if you were interacting with patients on a regular basis, talk about the impact that you made on patients' lives, obviously within HIPAA guidelines, but talk about the impact that you made. Or maybe there's like some story about how you brought to light some accessibility issue, like a wheelchair ramp or some safety hazard. Those kinds of things are really important to showcase, and you can do this on your resume, or maybe in a portfolio entry, where you can show that kind of impact that you made, because that's the kind of thing that hiring managers are impressed with. Somebody that understands the impact that they can make in order to improve a situation.
So we have a really good question. What happens when previous jobs don't have those kinds of metrics?
You make it up. No, I'm just kidding. Do you, I wanted to ask if I could ask a little bit more and tell me some more about it. If you're, if, is it Nayeli can come off mute and ask?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes like jobs don't really, you know, that you don't really keep like head count of how many people you see a day, or you don't really keep a head count of things. And sometimes you're not doing a job that you're actually in charge of, like making the money for the company or making the decisions that actually affect those kind of outcomes. So how can you say, oh, I increased the sales when that was not part of my job?
Tell me the job you're thinking of.
Oh, I'm thinking, because I've had a lot of jobs, but I just don't see where any of them like actually, like I used to be, like, for example, I used to be a photo editor, which a lot of the skills do, because I used to use like Adobe Suite and stuff. Those skills do relate to UX, but then my job did not impact it, or my job had nothing to do with the sales part of the company. So if they did better or not, it wasn't like something I like specifically did.
So let me ask you this. When you were doing photo editing, who was the consumer of that? Like who looked at the
Um,
photos?
electronic companies,
Electronic companies?
yeah, like Logitech,
And why were they looking at your photos?
because they used to be for reverse engineering, or like we used to do reverse engineering. So they were looking at the microchips and all the little parts that the phones were made with.
Mm-hmm. So you can just talk about like the impact for, maybe it wasn't directly sales, and maybe it wasn't directly the end user, but in terms of like, there's usually a mission that the company is trying to accomplish. Like maybe it's like helping improve the efficiency of some process. Like you could talk about, maybe you don't have hard metrics, maybe not everybody does, but maybe you can talk through the way that you helped advance the mission of the work, so that that everybody's role has some sort of importance. And maybe it doesn't seem important to you, but you could at least add that little impact statement of like, companies that looked at the photos that I edited were able to, decide if this was the right product for them or help them reverse engineer. I mean, just talk about like how you helped, even if you don't have the, like, I increased sales by like 50%. Not everybody has that, but this might help show that you have a little bit more of a, I understand the mission of the organization I was working for and what my role had to do with it. And it took a little bit of homework to figure that out. It took me years to figure out the stuff that I was working on. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, great question. I'm on a call, thanks. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna share my story about what I used to do in my previous career. And it's taken me a long time to figure out how to like basically see what skills I used to have, because I don't know if you feel this way now, but I certainly felt back when I was transitioning that I was starting over. What I used to do was TV news producer. So I left college and I got my first job as a line producer at KXII in Sherman, Texas. And I worked there, and then I worked in Houston, and then I worked in Nashville as a morning producer. And that was my life. And I thought maybe one day I would be an executive producer, hopefully working at a network level. And I would be, going on that career path. But it turned out that I didn't really want to do that after all. And I left my, sorry that my dog is under my feet. I left that whole career path because I had a bad experience at the TV station in Nashville, and I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And I spent a solid year trying to figure out what to do now. And I taught myself nonlinear editing, because that was back in the day when like we still did like reel to reel and things like that. And I shot a documentary, and I thought I was going to start this whole video production company, and that didn't work out. I worked at a Williams-Sonoma. I worked at a skate shop, and I literally spun my wheels for a long time. Moved back to Austin, tried to get a job in PR because I thought, hey, I worked in TV, it's not that hard, and nobody would hire me. And so I honestly went crawling back to television. But fortunately, I got hired on as a web producer instead of a line producer, and I started putting news on the web. And that is what kind of led me into where I am today. I got really interested in it, went back to school, and I started learning some things. But I struggled with imposter syndrome, and I had such a limited network of people. I did not know any other designers. I only knew TV people, and none of them could help me, that I struggled to figure out what I could do. Where could I go? I didn't even know where to work. I didn't know people even hired web designers into a company. I tried to go out on my own. I started taking like clients and did a couple of projects, decided I was going to break out on my own, leave my job. It was going to be great. Only I had no idea how to network, and I had no idea I had no business sense about me, and just sat there stagnant for a long time. I took a job. I started looking for jobs because I ran out of money, and I got hired by luck at a local, a multi-specialty clinic, pretty large in town. And I was the only web designer, and I was a content manager. And they said, we need you to design our new website. Oh, and by the way, you'll build it too. I had none of those skills. Somehow I sold myself to them that I knew all this stuff. And here they want me to build this giant new website by myself. But you can bet that I was scrambling around. I think the way that I presented my past skills was that I had a couple of small projects under my belt. So I did a couple of small websites. I also was cheap. So they were hiring me for the salary level because I didn't have huge salary expectations at all. And I guess that was lucky for me because I got a lot of good learning experience out of it. I don't recommend that for everybody. But for me, I managed to sell myself because I was able to show like, oh yeah, I had that confidence and air about me that was like, oh yeah, I talk with people all the time. I used to, do news. So all of the things that I kind of had been doing at the TV station, I could kind of talk to them about, oh, you could do these kinds of things here. And I think that's what won me the job. Now that I'm looking back at that whole transition, I'm realizing what kind of a mess it was for me, and I didn't really have a clear idea of how to put those skills together. But if I look back, at where I am now versus where I was then, in TV I had a lot of the skills that I needed, and it wasn't apparent to me for years. So when I worked in TV, I did a lot of writing. I wrote all the time. It comes in real handy now as a UX writer. I know how to write concisely and get the point across. By the way, I don't like using the word utilize. I use the word use because in TV, we always go for smaller and smaller words. So that conciseness in the writing really helped. And I could totally have put UX writing on my resume. The other thing that I did was early on when I was in high school, I was doing newspaper layouts and PageMaker. It's not that different from doing the wireframe layouts and designs that I'm doing now in Figma. I was fascinated by it. I always wanted to learn more. How do I add images? How do I add graphics? I could have totally used all those skills to show that, oh yeah, I can absolutely do layouts and wireframes for you. The strength for me though, as a journalist, was the people element. I knew how to talk to people. I knew how to sit down and have a conversation, keep eye contact, and ask lots of questions and barely talk so that I could pull as much information out. The interviewing skills that I had in journalism school were perfect for usability research, usability testing, and the user research that I do now. And all those things, had I realized it at the time, really could have bolstered my my resume so that, I loved my job, but maybe I could have gotten a job at IBM or something like that. Maybe I could have set my sights a little bit higher and gone into that career just by looking at the base elements of what I did and not looking at it in terms of industry, but in terms of raw skills. And LinkedIn's going to help you with that. Amanda, what about you?
So I had started working in the customer service, like restaurant industry, from a really young age. And I feel like something that's really important about working in that industry is you learn some really important soft skills. You learn how to work with a team. You learn how to work in really high stress environments. You learn how to multitask. And you also are creating an experience for someone being a server or a bartender. And all of those skills play into the soft skills that not everyone has, but are really essential to being a UX designer. I also spent some time doing sales and some time doing customer service representative type stuff. And in both of those roles, you definitely need, communication. You need to be able to develop empathy as a customer service representative. And like I said before, like not everyone has those soft skills, and to have any type of the soft skills required in a LinkedIn role that you see on LinkedIn is like you can play that to your advantage, and it really does set you apart from other people. Even my degree, I studied communication theory, and I wrote a lot of verbose papers, just so many. But writing to me comes really easily. So when I'm doing UX research, I can write this beautiful report. It's easy. It doesn't take me too much time. I don't really have to think about it. And, and that sets me apart from other people who maybe don't have that skill. So if you look critically at all of your past experience and pull out the tasks that you did on a day-to-day basis, and then go a step further and pull out what the soft skill required is to do that task, I guarantee you have at least a handful of soft skills that are transferable to UX roles.
There was a really good question in the chat about, where is there a list of raw skills to look at? Honestly, I go and look at LinkedIn. There's like all the tags of all the skills, which will give you some idea of just, something to add to that skills section. And I think you can put like 50 in your LinkedIn profile. So for a long time, I had a lot of coding type stuff because I was developing as well as designing. And I had like CSS and HTML, and I just found them on LinkedIn. And those are kind of hard skills right there. But they also have like public speaking and writing, and I think you can add empathy. And you can also do a Google search on soft skills. There's some really good resources on like Forbes and Inc. and Entrepreneur. Those kind of businessy magazines are talking about those things all the time in terms of soft skills. So it's worth doing a search for those. So that will help you as you're developing skills. I want to tell this story that's kind of on a tangent, but so my husband is a software developer, and he worked at a company with this other guy, and they got into the LinkedIn skills, and they would suggest skills for each other, but they would suggest ones that were so random. There's some random ones on there. So I think one of them is squirrels. Like there's a squirrel skill, and it ended up on, I think, on my husband's LinkedIn. So he has squirrels, but there were some other ones that were so inappropriate that he was like, no, you can't put that on my LinkedIn. But kind of a fun thing if you have a close friend that you can like needle at. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. Did you learn business knowledge on the job? If not, where did you look to become somewhat familiar with all the terminology? Great question, Cassie. Ooh, I did. I learned on the job. I don't recommend it. It's something that there's so much to like running like a business that if you're running a business and trying to learn it at the same time, I don't recommend it. However, there are some really great programs that you can enroll in to learn some of the business things you need. And I don't mean an MBA program. There's a lot of MBA programs out there, and a lot of them are wonderful. Like I know the Macomb School of Business, but it's also very expensive. And if you don't have that, I'm not suggesting that you do that. The city of Austin and probably other cities around the country, has a small business development center. And they do training for people, entrepreneurs, and I think anybody can join that and take classes around some business skills, right? Basic finance, procurement, and by the way, the person who put procurement on like as a skill that doesn't apply to UX, it absolutely applies to UX, particularly if you're going after an agency job, because agencies are always dealing with procurement people. And because if they're winning an RFP, they have to go through procurement, and there's that whole process of understanding that. And agency owners don't always understand that. Account managers don't always understand that. And so if you're a UX designer working in an agency that does a lot of RFPs, that skill you have in, on the other side from procurement is going to come in handy. So definitely put that on your resume. What was the other question? Let's see, business stuff. I'm trying to think. In terms of like getting familiar with the terminology, I read a lot of business books, so that helps. So I'm always like reading about, things on like Forbes and Entrepreneur, and as much as I can about like, starting your own business and things like that. They'll give you a lot of the terminology and the jargon that have to go around that. I also learn a lot by going to different groups that are for business networking. If you have the ability to do that, something like the Association for Corporate Growth. They have a chapter in Austin and San Antonio. It's ACG. And I went to a couple of luncheons. They have business people coming in, talking about all sorts of things. And they were talking about this EBITDA. I'm like, EBITDA? I had to do a Google search on what EBITDA is, and I don't think I could define it for you, but it has to do with like the value of a corporation. So I was learning a lot just going and being around like other people who were in business, because they just throw that out there like everybody knows. And so that's a great way, just being immersed in it. It's kind of like learning a foreign language. If you go and live in Spain for a while, you're probably going to pick up Spanish. So being around people who run businesses, who work in kind of the business world, will help teach you that terminology. I know that I am always thinking about budgets and ROI and all sorts of things. So surround yourself with people that are interested in that. There's another question. I'm doing a case. Yes, you can post a survey here. Yes, I agree. Rosenfeld Media, great for the UX books. I also like O'Reilly. That's a great other source of UX books. Let's see, looking to see. Any other questions so far on skills? This is a great time before we break out into breakout rooms so you guys can work through this worksheet. You hear EBITDA too much in your other job? Tony, what do you do? If you don't mind coming off mute.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that. So I've worked graphic and brand design for a retailer. And so we're always worried about EBITDA. Even before we're like launching another line or we're working on something, EBITDA is always coming up in the conversation. It's like the second word that seems to come from any brand managers or anything before we even get started. So
Yeah.
I'm just like, EBITDA again. I thought I escaped it.
Absolutely.
But it is actually good. I mean, you have to look at that. It measures everything on your health as far as a company is concerned. So I mean, it is important.
Absolutely. And I think that the one area that not every program, if you're learning UX design, not every program looks at the business side of design. And whether you're working in an enterprise organization, a small company, a startup, or an agency, the people who run those organizations always are thinking of business, budget. The design is there to help, right? You're there for the user, but you're also there to align the user's needs with the goals of the business. And if you can bring that into your vocabulary now, as a designer who's early in your career, or maybe looking for your first UX job, that is another thing that sets you apart. So Tony, you already, if you're able to define EBITDA and look at your impact, the impact that your role has on the bottom line, that actually is going to be really strong. And you can talk about business skills on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile. You know, talk about the impact. Look for those, you know, things in terms of like, you know, this was a really good opportunity for my organization to increase, you know, customer retention by like 5%, and that was the measurable. You know, like you can really get geeky in your case study on in terms of like that. So as a graphic designer transitioning to UX, that's going to help you a lot.
Huh, thank you.
Yeah. I'm looking at the chat. Let's see. Angela, I'm not quite, do you recommend that you enlist a friend to help you interview you and help you make your accomplishments, or do you recommend finding a more distant person? Do you mean in terms of figuring out your skills now so that you can put them on your resume? If you don't mind my asking. Yes, okay. So I recommend both. Okay, so a close friend that knows your history and can tell you honestly, like, yes, look, you forgot about this. Hey, girlfriend, you forgot about this. Like those kinds of things are really helpful. Now, once you've got that written down, then go talk to somebody that maybe you don't know as well and have them review it. More eyes are great in terms of looking at those skills. Like one person might see some things and then another person might see something else and point that out, right? Like, and it might help if you also look at varying levels of experience, particularly pull in your friends that have a long work history, maybe that you admire their resume and they've done some good wordsmithing. They're going to give you good advice on yours as well. I hope that answered your question. How far can we go back on a resume? I started a different career 20 years ago that taught me transferable skills for moving into UX, but I don't want to seem old. Yeah, that's really tough, right, Kristen? That's really hard. I'm old. Like I'm older than dirt. And I still have all my stuff on there because, you know, like if you put, I don't want to hide it, right? Like I don't want to hide that there's nobody's going to believe me when they look at the wrinkles around my eyes that I'm like 20. Nobody is. So I have my graduation year. I graduated from UT in 1998. So if I don't have work history from 1998, then I'm going to look like I'm lying, or maybe what happened. I got to cover that gap somehow. Like what happened out of college, right? Maybe you don't emphasize it. Maybe like at the very end, there's like lines of like, you know, oh, I worked here and here and here and here and here. Goes back to whatever. You don't have to give like a giant blurb for every single thing that you've done over the past 20 years. But I wouldn't hide it, because when people see gaps in resumes, then they start asking questions like what happened? Did you take time off? Did you get fired? Did you get laid off? And that's not a bad thing. Just because you got laid off, just because there's a gap in your work history doesn't mean that that's bad, but they're going to ask you about it. So you might just say, hey, I had another whole career and ask me about it. It spans back to whatever. You know, if you just kind of want to skim over it. Like maybe it was like, I know that I don't put Williams-Sonoma on my resume, so I don't feel like I needed to. I had something else to kind of cover me during that time. So you don't have to put everything. Let's see. How much of your resume should be, well, let me ask, Kristen, did I answer your question? Yeah, cool. All right, how much of your resume should be dedicated to your past skills, job history? Great question. If you have 0 UX, then all of it should be your past skills. I'm hoping though that all of you have some experience, like maybe you did a project or you went through a boot camp program or you did like an online course. So for sure, if you have that, put that at the top. You don't have to go on and have 4 pages. If you're new to UX, and you don't have a whole lot of work history, you don't need to have 4 pages of resume necessarily. It's up to you. But you definitely want to focus on those hard and soft skills and maybe give a big area to that, because they're all current. Just because it's past jobs doesn't mean that the skills are necessarily past. They're all your current skills. So make sure that you showcase those in some way, whether it's in like a sidebar or whatever you're doing. And then show like your work history. You know, it can be short. Maybe if you didn't like your job, maybe you're a bank teller and you're like, oh, I don't really want to showcase that. Just talk about bank teller, customer service experience, blah, move on to the next thing, right? So you can definitely make it fit. I hope I answered your question, Gwen. Angela, I like your comment, Angela. Yes, you can limit your resume to the last 10 years and add with previous experience, yes. Do you have a recommended many-page resume? So I personally have a lot of pages. I have like 3. I don't recommend that. I would keep it to 2. But I totally disagree with this whole thing that has to be 1. This whole 1-page thing stemmed from like being able to print your resume and have it like somebody look at it. We live in electronic times. Now, do you want someone to have like 16 pages to read through? Absolutely not. Brief and to the point, enough to showcase your skills, but you don't have to like try to fit everything into that one piece of paper anymore. It doesn't fly. Dara had a good comment about told to go back in the last 15 years in your resume by an Indeed resume writer. Could be valid. Has it worked? I don't know. I've created my own job. So my resume is there to get into like programs that I want to be part of. So typically they're looking for a lot more. And if you're looking for a senior level or a mid-level, they might want to see more experience. So, you know, it depends. If you had a job that wasn't relevant more than 15 years ago, then leave it off. You know, I don't have internships from my early days on there. I just had them drop off and I started condensing as much as possible. I've seen jobs post that they need someone with 4 to 6 years of experience. I'd be considered a junior UX designer. What is your perspective on that? Oh, I am so sorry. I think junior UX designers are getting the short end of the stick right now. I see that too. Everybody wants a mid-level or senior level designer with like, some of them are like ridiculous in the amount of experience they're asking for, and they don't want to pay for it. They want to pay a junior level salary for someone that has 5 or more years experience. And I wish I had a way to combat that. It's partly education, and it's partly like hiring managers don't know. Like I've seen people that say they want like 5 years of Figma experience. You can't have 5 years of Figma experience. It didn't exist 5 years ago. So they don't know. They really don't. They have no idea. So what I would say is that's where those past job experiences and past industry experiences really beef you up. This is where you wordsmith and look for it. Like, look at how much experience I have. I did a internal web page and designed it for my previous company back in 5 years ago. That totally counts. So you can, it's not lying. I don't want you to lie. But that's where, like, when they look and say, oh my gosh, I've got this candidate that has all this experience, and maybe they don't have 4 to 6 years experience, but man, they look really good. So this is someone that we want to bring in. Also, what the problem that I see often is that, and I'm not trying to be, mean about this, but a lot of times, like, I know that I always looked and tried to, as a woman, tried to make sure that I had 99% of the skills or the requirements in a job post before I would apply. And I don't think my husband has the same. Like, he was just like, yeah, it's good enough. And he would go after it and then he'd get it. So if you are a junior and they're asking for 4 to 6 years and you've got 2 years, go for it. Absolutely go for it. Beef up that resume, show some stellar work. That's going to turn heads over years of experience anytime. Okay? All right, we got another question here. Should your resume be 8 by 11.5 and then a portfolio? Can you just put your resume in an online portfolio? So what I'm taking from your question is that can you put your resume online as like an HTML document? And you can do that, but hiring managers want to be able to download and look at it later. So I recommend putting it like in a PDF standard format. They'll print it out, they're handed out to the team, and then the team is going to have it in front of them sometimes. Or they might have it like in a Word application or something like that on their screen. So I don't recommend relying on something that relies on the internet all the time. So I would have both. Portfolio, you can put your resume on it, and then also something that they can download. And what I've been hearing from some of the career people for the program that I teach for is that they recommend, and I can't remember the name of it, they recommend 2 versions of your resume: your designed resume, and then the one that gets past the automated tools that are like that hiring managers use to look for certain keywords in your resume. It's like an ADT or something like that kind of resume. Definitely have both. That other version, the ugly version, that is like easy to scan, that's the one that gets you past those in the big companies that are like using those big filters to get through hundreds of resumes really quickly. Okay, I have a non-traditional student problem. I did various jobs previous to my 30s, including domestic engineer. Then during my 30s, got my bachelor's, and now 5 years later, it looks like I've only worked for 5 years. I'm in STEM now, and previously I was working in various jobs in high school level. None of these jobs relate to my work now, but I learned leadership and other skills. How do you handle being older than dirt? Only 4 to 5 years experience in STEM, but 15 years of silly work experience. Gosh, this is such a great question, Angela, and I'm sure you're not the only one that's kind of dealing with kind of this quandary of like, what do I do with all this stuff beforehand? This might be a place to kind of, show like, I'm starting fresh, I think be proud. I stayed at home. I stayed at home for these kind of years, and now I'm reinventing myself. And now I want to put these skills to work. Leadership, that is such a huge skill that is definitely needed in a lot of companies. And I highly recommend highlighting that. You're a leader, you're a visionary, you know what you need. You went back to school. Like, talk about your story. Really see if you can craft your story on your portfolio, a little bit in your resume to kind of show that. And maybe you have a special case. I actually have a friend who, her name is Samantha Stevens. She has a company called First Job Austin. And she actually helps new college grads and women who are transitioning back into the workforce to kind of get like into a position, and does a lot of career consultation. So if you're interested, I can hook you up with her if that helps. You saw a job where they wanted over 12 years of experience and a PhD. Yeah, people are silly. Totally silly. Let's see, there's a survey there. Would I be able to share some of the stuff I have learned on the job qualifications for applying? Jacob, yes. Would you like to come off mute?
Yeah, I wasn't really sure exactly how to ask that question, but I had all this anxiety because I was like getting into this for the first time, and I'm doing a boot camp right now. And it was like, oh my God, okay, so I'm not going to be able to get a job doing this for like years. This is crazy. And then I was talking with, my mentor through that program, and I was talking to some other UX folks that have been there for a while, and they're like, that's just, they throw the kitchen sink in there. Like, it's like everything they could possibly want, pie in the sky, but it's not actually realistic, because obviously if you had 3 years as a UX designer, you wouldn't be a junior UX designer. You would be, like that's not what that is. So it definitely made me feel a lot calmer to be like, oh, okay, well, fine. I can put anything on a job explanation, right? Like, I could have you have 2 PhDs and 17 years in the field. I could write that. That doesn't mean that anybody can fit that. That's going to, work for that amount of money. So just wanted to, like, if there's anybody else that's like sweating bullets, like, oh my God, I'm never going to get a job doing this. I think that what people like the Amazons and these small companies as well are putting out there is not actually reflective of the job pool.
Totally agree with that. And yeah, this is a great opportunity for you guys to jump into the Slack group and start conversation amongst yourselves so that you can help each other build up your resumes and be on the lookout for those, positions and be like, what are they thinking? Or, like, oh, am I going crazy? Should I have all this experience? And for you to feel good when everybody else is jumping in and saying, no, you don't need to. Would you recommend going to grad school, like an HCI, to get a better chance to get into UX? So that's a great question. And I know I'm in grad school and I'm getting my degree in UX, and it was not to get a better job in UX. And I will say that I don't think you need to go to grad school to get a better job in UX. I would say that all it is going to do is delay you from entering the field. And the sooner you get in the field, the sooner you get some experience, the better off you're going to be. Experience is by far better. And yes, you get projects and a portfolio in grad school, but if you've already taken a boot camp program, if you've already, gotten enough skills to work as a junior designer, then go for it. Do not let that stop you. So don't delay entering the workforce to get your first job in UX, unless it's really calling to you and you're like, I absolutely have to do this and this is the start. But I don't think you should have to. Let's see. ATS, thank you. I'm coming down I'm trying to get to the chat. I want to make sure that you guys have enough time for activity, but I do want to answer these questions. Are there any good resources out there for seeing a before after resume revamping? While you guys are in the breakout room, we did do a little bit of a search and we found some really terrible examples, but I can show you what my resume looks like. Let's see. Even after staying home, requires skills that are similar to UX. Yes, exactly. Dara, you're totally right. Staying home requires skills. There's management of a household. There's like managing all these, individual people, small people. I mean, I have a coffee mug that says, today's goal is to keep the tiny humans alive. I mean, there's a lot to that. So don't discount any of your past experience. All right, I'm going to looking for any other question marks. Where's the Slack group link? If you go to the meetup group, the main page, down underneath is the invite link and you can join Slack there. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing that. And looking through really quick. Amanda, go ahead and share our activity in the chat for everyone while I'm looking for questions. Resources for preparing for technical interviews and tasks, if they even exist for qualitative UX roles. A lot of boot camps will have resources. What I would say is reach out to your fellow UX designers to prep you for those kinds of things. Definitely reach out if you have anybody who's kind of a mentor. That would be a really good source for you that can help you prep for those interviews. I know I've helped some folks too. So use your network to reach out to them and ask for help. There are some mentor networks. So if you go to adplist.com, you can reach out to mentors in design all over the world and set up a session with them. And there's some really great resources there for you. How would you recommend someone getting started in UX? Sharon, that's a really good question. I would say, get a project. That's how I did it. So I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna design, and I begged my friend Doug, and I said, Doug, I want to do a website for you. You need a website. I need a job, and how about we trade? And so I did a first website, and he gave me this. So that kind of stuff, like go out there and practice as much as you can. And if you're unclear as to like what the first steps are, there's really great books out there. You can go to the A Book Apart library. There's wonderful like one-day reads. Like Erica Hall has a great book called Just Enough Research. Very short, everything you need to know about conducting user research. That'll get you started. Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think and Rocket Science Made Easier, or Made Easy, such a great resource for user testing. That's how I learned how to do it. that's if you're not interested in doing a boot camp program. And then there's some wonderful boot camp programs in Austin and around the country that can, teach you a lot of those skills. I teach for the boot camp at the University of Texas. General Assembly has some great boot camps. All of them are running virtually right now. So if you have a little bit to invest in it, you can absolutely start there. Let's see. All right, so Amanda, oh my gosh, there's so many messages. I'm gonna try to get through it, but it's 7:10. I wanna send you guys out to breakout rooms. Can everybody see the Google Doc in the chat? Give me a wave if you do. You can open that Google Doc and make a copy of it. And what's in it is a worksheet that you can start working through and thinking through all those transferable skills. This is going to help you reflect on it, because really reflection is needed now. And then this is a great opportunity if you have some friends that can help look at it and say, hey, remember, what about this? What about this? What about this? There's so many things that you can apply and think through on this. So make that copy. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to make a breakout room if I can find it. Did I not make the ability for breakout rooms yet again? I guess I didn't. We'll do that here. I'll answer your questions while you guys are making a copy and starting to work on the worksheet. Okay. Practice whiteboarding exercises for product interviews. That is such a great point. And, whiteboarding is one area that I'm not as strong at because I never had to do it for my roles. But there are some really great frameworks that you can look up. And I believe there's a lot of them out there, but there's like a whiteboarding challenge framework, which will walk you through all the steps for those kinds of things. Let's see. Yes, sorry. I'm just catching up on all of the wonderful conversation you guys are having. And does anybody want to come off mute and ask me any questions? You guys are working? All right, so again, if you want to join Slack, there's a link that you can go to on the Meetup homepage, and it's under UX and ATX, and you can just click on that link and it will let you join the UX and ATX Slack group. And if you're familiar with Slack, you can either do it in the browser, you can do it on your phone, or you can do it, I have the desktop app and I have it open all the time. Okay, so for this worksheet, I want you to think through, what is your current role or your last role? And you can go a little bit farther back if you want, but probably that most recent one is going to give you the most insight here. And think about those duties, okay? So for example, if I thought about my last role before I was moved into design, and I was that web producer, that doesn't count as a designer role. I was that web producer, and the duties that I had, I was posting articles to the content management system that the station used in order to post news. I would write articles. I had to be a really good communicator because I had to take the stuff that the reporters would give me and I had to turn it into something that was spoken into something that would be read, because it's very different writing. And so that was something I did there. Sometimes I created graphics. Sometimes I went out and did photo stories, and I would take images and then I'd have to go into Photoshop and I'd have to manipulate the image so that it could go onto the web, so photo editing. I had to, and the soft skills that I overlooked there were, managing a bunch of really big personalities in the newsroom. So, the ability to multitask. I was doing so many things at once all the time. And those things, like, I didn't even think about it at the time because it was normal. But there are people that I talk to now and they're like, you're not supposed to multitask. And I'm like, I was doing like 10 things at one time. Those kinds of things are really helpful. The other big thing that can apply for me is that I had a lot of ability to handle a lot of pressure. And that was normal in news, is like when breaking news happened, everything stopped. The whole world came, crashing in. but I had to keep my cool and I had to keep moving forward and stay organized as much as possible. I don't know if you guys remember the last big breaking news event I remember, and I was by myself as the web producer, was when the plane flew into the building, into the IRS building in Northwest Austin. I don't know if you guys, any of you remember it. It's been 2004, no, 2009, I think it was. And it was huge breaking news event, and there was so much going on. And that kind of ability to manage multiple people yelling at me about things, being on the phone, posting the news, keeping on top of those things, those are all soft skills that I was able to translate into what I'm doing as a UX designer now, with managing lots of things coming at me at once and being able to prioritize, you know, what needs to happen next, you know, that feature prioritization, that, you know, handling lots of demands from demanding clients. Those are the kinds of things that I was thinking of. Amanda, I feel like I've been talking for like 20 years. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I feel like you're like a very succinct and spot on speaker. So I feel like you really covered all of the key points there. I do want to say that I feel like maybe I shared a link that didn't work for the activity. So I'm going to try sharing another one because I don't see any little anonymous people in the file. So let me share another link out and let me know if it works, you guys, please.
I do too. You know, and something that this worksheet brings up with the, you know, what do you enjoy doing in your free time? This brings up another point. You know, maybe you don't have like a job that had a lot of skills that you can apply to UX now. Probably has some, I'm going to guess. But maybe you have like an organization that you're volunteering for, or that you're, you know, kind of doing on the side. Those skills from that organization could be very applicable, particularly if you have a leadership role. Maybe you're doing some sort of design for them, like helping out with their newsletter. There's all sorts of things that you're probably doing as a volunteer in organizations that you're not even thinking of in terms of skills, but those all apply as well. So think about, like, especially for those of you that maybe stayed at home and didn't have a you know, job outside the home. Like if you were volunteering, say for the PTA, or, you know, for like an animal, something, think about those skills. Like how can you apply those? So for that gap that I had when I worked at Williams-Sonoma and the skate shop, and I don't want people to see that on my resume, I actually said documentary producer because I was doing documentary producing on my own little thing, and it counted. And that actually helped me get into KView as a designer. Any questions that you guys have? All right. Oh, I'm so glad to see all of you join the Slack group. This is exciting. Well, I know we only have about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure to answer your questions as you're going through this. I want to encourage you to finish this even after tonight. And if you guys want to reach out to me, you can find me on Slack, and I can, you know, I don't mind doing mentor sessions with people. So I may not have availability tomorrow or next week, but we can definitely find a time, you know, over the next couple months where we can work through your resume, do any kind of help that you all need in terms of like getting that position that you're looking for. I'm going to assume that you guys all have some experience, but even if you don't, we can brainstorm on, you know, projects that you might want. I know that we had a whole crew of people that were interested in designing the new UX and ATX website. And they've got some great experience after their work all summer, collaborating together. It was like a group of 5, and they're almost ready to hand it off for development. And so those kinds of projects, like look for those kinds of opportunities. Sometimes you have to like lean in and say, hey, I noticed that you're lacking this. Can I help? would that be something that you'd be open to? I personally think people should be compensated for their work in some way, shape, or form. It may not be monetary. You might be able to negotiate having like your name really big on the website or something like that, depending on which organization you're offering your services for. But just definitely keep that in mind, that some sort of, like me trading for a painting, it's all valid. It's all valid. Right, anybody else? I need some like music going in the background. You guys are working. At the end of this sheet, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's some good skills in there. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's definitely a place to get you started thinking about things. And another thing you might think about is if I always recommend that people like, make a hit list of the companies they are interested in working for. Gina, I will answer your question. I love that question, but make a hit list. And then when you're going through and researching the companies that you're interested in working for, I would look at their value, their core values. Where can you fit in? Where do your skills fit in that overlap with those core values? Because that's the kind of thing that if, a lot of companies are looking for, people that fit their culture because they have a value fit with them. So for instance, my company has 5 company values and we definitely hire to them. We ask questions around them, and I'm looking at resumes, looking for evidence that I can see of them. So almost every company publishes them on their website. So that's all public for you. So if you really want to work at a company, figure out how your soft skills can align with their core values, because that will help you a lot. Gina had a great question. Do you have any quick tips for networking? Yes. God, networking is such a big topic though. So remember, one, that it's work, okay? So it's not just having a quick conversation and handing someone your resume. It is a follow-up. The key to networking is having a conversation and then making sure to follow up appropriately. So in the pandemic makes things a little bit harder because you can't just show up at a networking event, meet a few people, connect with them on LinkedIn. It's a little bit different. So what I typically do in a networking situation is I will read the room and I try to I try to jump in so people remember me. And then some interesting folks, I'll write down their name and maybe they've put their LinkedIn up in the chat, and I will click on it and I'll reach out to them through LinkedIn. And then I will do a follow-up. I'll ask them for a follow-up, like one-to-one. Like if you're looking to network with other UX designers, you might just say, hey, would love to understand your career. Tell me a little bit about your path. Love to, understand more about you. People love talking about themselves. So it's a great opportunity to kind of just listen to them. Then following, you definitely want to say thank you, and make sure that you just stay in touch with them. They may not have a job right then, and I definitely wouldn't say, hey, hire me, but I would follow up with them on a regular basis and just reach out and say, hey, I was thinking about you. Love to see how things are going. Do you have time for a quick Zoom chat or coffee? Hopefully we can have those times again. So those are really good opportunities to meet people. So if you're going to Austin Design Week, take advantage of that right now. But you can also do a search through the ADP list. You can do a search through LinkedIn and look for designers at companies that you want to work with and just reach out to them. It's scary and you will get rejection from 1 out of maybe 10. But there's 9 other people there that will say yes, because we're actually a very giving group like industry, and we're not that scary, and we actually want to help mentor young UX designers or people who are new in the career, because we didn't have that when we were starting out. So we want to help other people in general. Any other questions before we wrap up? How many people got done with the worksheet? I'm going to guess nobody. This is pretty long. I hope this has been helpful for you. There's so many good questions on here. It definitely takes some reflection. So I just want to recap really quickly what we talked about at the beginning. First rule, all of your skills are current, and most likely 99.9% of the time, your past jobs have given you skills that overlap with UX. So your mindset has to be, yes, okay, all of this is applicable. It may not be clear what they are yet, but the first step is just saying, yes, I'm not starting over, okay? The next step is acknowledging that all those fears that you have, that you don't know what you're doing and that you don't have enough skills and you're not going to get a job, that's all imposter syndrome. So it's hard to replace that soundtrack going in your head. So try to drown it out with a different soundtrack of either, your best friend or yourself, telling yourself over and over again, you are valid, you have the skills that you need. And if you need, I can record something for you and you can just play my voice over and over and over again, if that helps. So those are the main two things. The last thing, and here we go, don't hide the fact that you worked in another industry. There's some, it's up to you. You're going to get a lot of different advice on how far to go back in your work history. 20 years might be a little bit too much, especially if you have lots of jobs in there. But if you had a job that lasted for 15 years, you don't have to hide that. Just leave that in there and start over. If you don't like any of your jobs that you had, like if there were small, silly things, you don't have to include them. But just make sure that you're prepared to talk about like any gaps that you have in your work history. And really just know that you're not alone. Everyone that has joined UX, for the most part that I've met, is making some kind of career change somehow. Whether, maybe they did design the entire time, but they've shifted because UX wasn't always called UX, and maybe their job role has changed. Maybe they've moved around a lot, or maybe they went to product management, or maybe there's a software developer. Everybody is coming from a different place, and that's what makes it so exciting, is to work with people with such rich histories. And we're UX designers, right? We love people. That's why we're in this, is because we're fascinated by people. We want to help people. And whether we're introverts or extroverts, it draws us all together. And that's what we're here for. So I know it's 7:30. A lot of y'all have to leave. I'd love to connect with you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Tell me about that you're here tonight. I'll stick around for a little bit for those of you that have questions. But y'all have a wonderful evening. Appreciate it.
Well, is this a good time to ask some questions that maybe everybody already knows the answer to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Ask away.
Okay, so can you just, so I'm a technical writer, but I don't know much about UX. I know, my understanding, at least the impression I have, is that writing is involved, but is that what kind of a transition would that be? And if I don't know anything about any of the other stuff?
Yeah, I don't think it's, so one, as your strength as a writer is going to be helpful. It's a little bit different writing.
Okay.
UX writing is really focused on how can we clearly get, tell the user what we want them to do. On the interface, which sometimes I know that technical writing is oftentimes like manuals and things like that, although I'm probably overgeneralizing it, but you probably do a lot of that already. I mean,
Yeah.
as a technical writer, you're trying to explain to someone how to do something. in your writing. So UX writing is very similar. The difference is that if the designer has done their job, then you shouldn't have to explain how to use buttons, which is the biggest problem I see with a lot of interfaces these days. Is they're like, especially in government websites, where they're like, oh, if you see this button, click here. You shouldn't have to write that. So you wouldn't need to write that kind of stuff. But the writing is like, what is the text in the button that makes the most sense? How are we communicating in the blocks of copy to explain our messaging? So it's slightly different, but I definitely think it's transferable for you. And I would say if you're interested in UX writing, it's actually an in-demand field. And there are courses out there. I'm not sure if Coursera has any, but it's definitely worth looking. And you can practice. There's meetups that's there's books that specifically talk about UX writing. I know if you do like a search, there's some O'Reilly books out there, and there's probably others as well. And so I would say, one, familiarize yourself with what UX writing looks like. And I honestly I think it takes practice from there, because if you're a writer, to me, writing is writing. It's just a matter of learning how to write for that different medium.
Right. So I heard, I heard UX and UI design. What is that compared to UX writing? That's different things. Are those two different things?
They're a little bit different, yeah. So UX design in general is like this huge umbrella. And then there's underneath that, there's a lot of stuff, including the actual design of the interface, which is the user interface design. And sometimes the person who is designing the interface, like the actual, like where things go on the screen, is also doing the writing. But in larger companies, they're splitting that functionality out. And in fact, back in the day, I believe that this is the case. It was actually content strategy, and there's still content strategists that are out there, and so really companies should invest in having content strategists and UX designers working together. So they're designing the look and feel with a content strategist who's helping design the entire information architecture and what's actually said on the screen. And there's a great book by Abby Covert. She wrote a book of like how to make a sense of any mess. And I just saw her speak. She's awesome. And then Christina Halverson has a book called Content Strategy for the Web. And that's a fantastic book. That's like my Bible. And she's an amazing person and does a conference every year called Confab. And so if you're interested in the content side, it's rich and deep. And it goes, they work hand in hand with the designer who's pushing the pixels on the screen.
Okay.
And there was a question for my LinkedIn link, so let me find it for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Tori, it's content strategist for sure. I actually, that was one of the things that I initially started doing because journalism just seemed like a good fit for content strategy. And so I spent a long time like understanding content, and I preached at my clients for a long time about content strategy and why they needed to like invest in it. Doesn't always work for small businesses, but big companies definitely understand it. And I got to hear in one of my classes, I got to listen to a guy that does content strategy, and he's like a contractor for, I want to say Marriott. And so like these big, large companies are employing content strategists to help them determine like what people are seeing and how they understand. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, talking about the whole imposter syndrome thing, there's some like really, I don't know, vocal people on LinkedIn that I see who are basically like, new designers are just ruining the field of UX design, and anybody who has UX UI designer in their title is just sending this whole enterprise to hell in a handbasket. And all this stuff, and it's kind of hard to know like what to think about that as a newer designer who I am interested in more of the visual design side of the UX process, but I also really care about crafting the experience. So I'm kind of interested in that whole area, and maybe if I get more experience, I'll be able to narrow that down. But it's just hard to like, you see what they say and it just feels like it's some huge task that like, oh, I could never be good enough for them to approve of me as a designer, and does that mean that I'm not doing the right thing, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't help. And unfortunately, there are some big jerks out there. And that's one of the reasons why I like am very careful about cultivating my network, because I don't want to be surrounded by people that are just going to poo-poo newer designers, because it is so important to have a mix of people on your team, people that are coming from a wide variety of backgrounds, because it's easy to get stale and stagnant as a designer. And I will say that even it happened to me. And when Amanda came on our team, she brought in this fresh eyes, fresh look, and it totally reinvigorated what we were doing. And there's a real benefit to having juniors. You're not going to convince the naysayers who have a lot of fear. That's probably a lot of it is they have their own fear that they're going to lose their job to juniors. But someone like Jared Spool, if you know who that is, he's one of the people that is cultivating junior designers. He's been around for years. Get on his Leaders of Awesomeness. He's amazing. He's also funny. And he talks about how teams should bring in junior designers. It's important to bring in new people. And one of the reasons why I like working with juniors, whether they be design or developers, is that I can cultivate them where I need them to be. They're not coming in with preconceived notions that I have to break down before I get the work that I want. And they're open to that new mindset. And unfortunately, there are people that are jerks. So I don't think that, I mean, I can't say that they're not there's a minority of them, because I just don't know. But I know I don't feel like that. And there's a lot of people like me who are out there preaching that we need to teach designers instead of trying to keep them out of roles.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of what Cindy said, but I remember when I first was starting the job search and looking on LinkedIn and seeing how poorly the leaders of the UX industry were treating juniors. And I don't think that is by any means the standard of how most people who have been in the field think. And I think there's a real need for UX designers, and there is a lack of seniors to help mentor them, but they're taking the wrong attitude. Like there's a need for people to fill the role, and the appropriate way to respond is to give help. And now, instead of following the negative people, I follow the positive people who build up the juniors, who support them, who offer mentor sessions. Like, I know there's like a handful of people I can recommend who are always praising junior UX designers and trying to build them up. And those are the people you want to surround yourself with in general in life. Like, you don't want to follow the naysayers and negative Nancys. So yeah, just ignore those people and write them off and just curse at them under your breath, because that is not normal. Just brush them.
Yeah, and that's why we started UX and ATX, was to help when you're facing those. I wanted to mix, I wanted to mix all levels. And admittedly, we have more juniors than we do seniors, but we're trying to build, a rising tide raises all boats. And so we want to make sure that everybody gets lifted. And it's important, just like Amanda said, just follow the positive people. There are lots of people who want to mentor junior designers and people who are just coming out of school, and, you know, focus on them, because you will find that right role. And it's, you know, if you went to the UX in the gaming industry meetup, Sydney Terrace was one of our guests, and she talked about how she was an intern under a designer at Coca-Cola, and it totally changed her life. She had been doing physics, getting her PhD in physics, and completely changed her, like a whole 180 degrees, to do UX game design. And that was amazing, you know. So she's a big believer in looking for those North Stars, those people that are willing to mentor you, and they may not be as loud and as vocal as those really big jerks, but you know, make sure that you try to drown them out, like with a new soundtrack. And you're welcome, Chris. Glad you could join us. So.
Amanda, you said you had a list of some people. If you could like drop them in the chat or something, I can try to follow them on LinkedIn or something.
Yeah, so why don't you, like, I know Joel Barr is one. He's a UX researcher at Cigna, and he is like always preaching the praises of junior UX designers. And if you reach out to me on LinkedIn saying, every time you see a positive role model in the UX community, send them to me, I'll start making a list, because that is something I should have written down for new designers to follow, these, you know, these positive leaders in the community.
We should totally publish that on the blog too. We totally publish that.
Mm-hmm.
I just gave her a new assignment. Write another blog post. Yeah, and the other thing about senior designers is that, I mean, we don't always see our faults, honestly. Like, we just don't always see it. We don't see that there's a lot of good that comes from bringing in new people. So, you know, we get frustrated sometimes because we have to stop and maybe teach others about like what we do. And honestly, some people aren't good at teaching. They don't have that skill. And so it makes them uncomfortable. And the other thing is that we're also, particularly in agencies, you know, we're working so fast. We don't have time to stop and mentor and teach on the job. And so that might be where a lot of it comes from too, is maybe they had a bad experience with that, or maybe they had a designer that they didn't have very good hiring policy, you know, practices, and they brought in someone that turned out to not be a good fit. There's so many things that can go into the way that people react to juniors, but I don't agree with them. Yeah, and some are gatekeepers too, and it is unfortunate. And then, you know, hopefully that there's a lot of other companies that you can focus on and get hired at. What other questions do you guys have? I see some people hanging out. Good, y'all are here.
I don't really have a question, but I'm about to leave, and I just really wanted to say thank you. I'm in the UT UX bootcamp with Miguel, and
yeah.
I also teach, and I just feel really overwhelmed, like, with it all. And I want to leave this career and go into this career, but I'm going through this struggle. Anyway, this was here exactly when I needed it, and that makes, I know that kind of sounds, but I needed to hear this message like today.
Well,
so
good.
I find that I signed up, you know, a little while ago, but it really became apparent today. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Can I ask what you teach?
Yes, I'm a high school art teacher.
Oh my God, I need to get on the Slack channel. I need to hook you up with one of my former students. Her name is Jessica. She teaches little kids art, but she made that transition too.
Okay.
So she's making, so you guys should totally talk and get to know each other, because very similar background experience.
Right. So this is like this is my future. It's just, it's hard when, you know, I don't want to let anybody down.
Oh, I
And
need to hook you up
so
with James too.
it's
She should
just
meet
hard.
James. Yeah, so we had
So,
I had another student named James, and he taught, um, uh, he taught something in high school. It was artish, but it was not art.
mhm,
And he went through a major struggle with the guilt he felt of like leaving his
mhm,
students. And he stayed,
yeah,
I advised him to stay through the end of the year.
okay.
Miguel disagreed with me completely. I think we had an argument about it.
Right.
But I told James not to worry about it. It's okay. And, you know, and he decided to stay and see it through so that he can make that. And he missed out on an opportunity at the time, which
Okay.
was really hard for him.
Yeah.
They went right then. And he's like, I can't let my students down. And I said, it's totally okay to not let your students down.
So did he end up and eventually finding a position?
I think he's still looking,
Oh,
honestly. But
okay.
I mean, I don't remember. I haven't kept up
Okay.
with him.
Okay.
So I think things are working out for him. I know he was transitioning out of teaching.
Okay.
So,
All right.
but you know,
Well,
opportunities always come. Always.
yes, I just need to get this LinkedIn profile and resume and all that. It's just that big thing that I'm like, I don't want to, but I know I needed to. So you gave me like the confidence or the calmness, I think, that I need to go tackle that. So that'll feel good to get that done and get it off my list and, you know, keep going forward. So
Good
anyway,
deal.
thanks, Amanda, too.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
y'all's time. Y'all have a
Yeah.
good night. I might join you